Well, John, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, you've been looking into the health budget in particular in terms of how it's affecting the government. What did you find?
Look, over the last 10 years, health has been one of the fastest growing categories of expenditure, both for state and for Commonwealth governments. Collectively, their health expenditure has gone up by $42 billion in real terms. Bear in mind, Australian governments collectively only spend a little bit more than $500 billion, and of that, $42 billion is just the increase in health expenditure. So as a result, it's grown substantially faster than GDP, and if it continues to grow at the same rate over the next 10 years, we could easily see it eat up another 1.5 to 2 percentage points of GDP, and implicitly, of course, if it keeps doing that, something else is going to have to give.
Of course, the flip side of that is it's a fantastic industry to be in, I guess.
Oh, it's a terrific industry. And the fascinating thing about this is that the growth has not primarily been driven by the ageing of the population. The sort of conventional wisdom is that, yes, as the population gets older, older people use more health services, and that's what's driving the growth.
But that's true as well, isn't it?
Well, it's true a little bit, but actually it's very little of the growth we've seen in the last decade. A little bit of the tiny bit of the growth we've seen is the inflation in health costs. And almost all of it is the fact that a 60-year-old today, relative to a 60-year-old 10 years ago, sees the doctor more often, has more operations, has more tests, and then takes more prescription drugs. So we're servicing people more. Now, the good news is that people are staying alive for longer and in better health. The bad news is that someone's going to have to pay for it.
Well, so what is that down to? Is that simply because there's more things have been invented for people to have done to them? More medicines that have been discovered, more procedures have been invented.
A large part of that is, yes, essentially the advances in medical innovation and technology. A part of it, of course, is the fact that we essentially have a demand-driven health system. The way that our health system works is that if you turn up to the doctor, then the doctor will service you, and then they will charge it to the government in terms of medical benefits. And the government is essentially responsible to pay all the medical benefits that medical practitioners put in for. So it's a demand-driven system. The same is roughly true of the pharmaceutical benefits. We can decide what does or doesn't go into the pharmaceutical benefits list, as it were, for any 1 year, but however many people turn up with a script for a particular drug, if it's on the list, then essentially the Commonwealth government pays for it. So it's fundamentally a demand-driven system. As demand goes up, as people become more and more aware of what medicine can do for them, the costs of it get higher and higher.
There are gaps between what the government pays and what people have to pay, aren't there? So the government doesn't pay all of the costs.
That's absolutely right. And then you also see that if you look at where people are spending their own individual money. So personal expenditure on health as a percentage of a person's wallet, if you like, has substantially increased over the last couple of decades as well. So yes, both of those things are going on. But in terms of trying to look after government budgets, the key piece that matters is how much is being charged to the government purse. That's going up very fast.
And to what extent are ancillary, what you might call ancillary health services, such as dentistry, physiotherapy and other things like that, how important are they as a part of it?
Well, we dug into this health expenditure to ask, what's driving this? Is it just doctors or hospitals or whatever? And it certainly looks like the answer to that question is it's essentially across every category of health spending. And as always, there's slight differences between them, but really the story is all of these categories are going up more or less in parallel. And as I said, I think there's some very fundamental drivers behind that. One of the catches, of course, is we've been able to afford that in the last decade because we've had this enormous terms of trade boom that's essentially meant that Australian governments had more money every year than they did the previous year. So they could afford to see this health expenditure go up and just effectively pay for it. Now, of course, in the next decade, as that terms of trade boom goes into reverse, they're going to be under a lot more pressure.
So what's the solution to this?
Well, it's going to be hard. Either we need to reduce health expenditures, or we need to reduce other expenditures, or we need to increase taxes, or most likely we need to do all three. As you were pointing out, this growth in health expenditures is not random. It's not like people don't want it. It's just that we're going to have to find a way to pay for it.
Well, so how do we control health expenditures? Do we make it so that it's no longer demand driven?
I think that will be very difficult to do, and of course, in some ways,
that would imply rationing the supply, I guess, which is done to some extent, I suppose. But it is never going to change from being what it is.
Yeah, rationing health supply is very hard. As you point out, we already do it. Hospital waiting lists are an exotic form of rationing health supply. Now, they may not be a very efficient way of doing it, but that's effectively how our system at least rations hospital services. Going forwards, I don't know how we're going to do it because, as I said, there will be enormous social pressure to essentially cut other things to pay for health. People are very attached to living for longer.
Right. That's true. It's great talking to you, John. Thanks very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.